There are approximately 5,000 lawyers in West Virginia. All of them belong to the state bar. So what does that mean? I'm Dan Ringer, and we'll talk about the West Virginia State Bar right now on the LawWorks.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
The LawWorks is made possible by the generous support of the West Virginia State Bar, the Monongalia County Bar Association, and by a major grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system.
Organized in 1947, the West Virginia State Bar is an agency of the West Virginia State Supreme Court of Appeals. My guest is its president, Sandra Chapman of Wheeling. Madam President, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Let's start at the top, Sandra. What is the State Bar?
The State Bar in West Virginia is a mandatory organization. All lawyers who practice full-time in West Virginia must be a member of the West Virginia State Bar. The organization works on behalf of its members, but also seeks to serve the public by serving its members and in other fashions as well.
When I started just a moment ago, I said it's an agency of the West Virginia State Supreme Court. So you answer in at least some part to the State Supreme Court.
Yes, that would be accurate. We are considered a quasi-state agency, but yes, we definitely look to and defer to and hear from the State Supreme Court.
In my experience, though, we've mentioned from time to time, I served as president some years ago. That's a two-way street. Oftentimes the Supreme Court will say, we need to do this or we need you to do that, and you kind of take your marching orders and you do it. But there's a back channel of communications too, where you meet with the justices, you talk about what needs to be done, what maybe needs to be changed.
Yes, we ask for their input from time to time and certainly welcome it at any time. But on particular issues, the officers, for example, may meet with the justices or the Chief Justice or whatever is preferred by them.
There are rules that govern the practice of law. The Supreme Court adopts those rules.
Yes, that's correct, and we can weigh in on behalf of the board to the development of those rules.
How do you help your lawyers?
Well, we like to think that we help them in many, many ways. One of the ways is that we have a computer research program that is a free service to our members, which enables a pass along to the clients at a much less, if any, expense for the research itself, not for the time involved in the research, but for the research itself. We have a lot of outreach programs to students. This year, for example, we have a YouTube or video competition which is open to public high school students. It's a cooperative effort. It's a pilot project this year. The West Virginia Department of Education is helping us drive that train, and we will be completing that in a couple of months ahead.
Let's talk about that a little bit. YouTube, most of you, I think, understand, is a video internet service where people can make little films. TV programs are on YouTube. In fact, we probably ought to mention that you can watch the LawWorks on YouTube. You can go to thelawworks.org and you can link directly to the program from our website, or you can go to YouTube, and if you search for the LawWorks, and I would suggest searching for the LawWorks West Virginia, you will find this program. You'll find an archive of all of this year's programs and selected programs from prior years. Now, your YouTube competition is for high school students, asking them to produce a film about what?
Yes, it's an idea that we have borrowed from some of our counterpart bar organizations in other states, and our bar decided to take it on this year. It started being considered as a public information aspect of our work, to let the public know that lawyers do good things, we do a lot of good things, and we are, in a lot of ways, public servants. We also wanted to look at the educational aspects of this sort of program, and we determined, at least for this year, to partner with the West Virginia Department of Education, and they were greeting us with open arms in terms of this initiative. And the way it was fashioned for this year is that it is open to public high school students, grades 9 to 12, and that's really because of the access that the Department of Education has to those schools and those students, and they have done a wonderful job of promoting the program into the schools, lots of outreach into the schools to tell them about the concept. The concept this year in particular that we have for our video competition is called Righting a Wrong. So the students are asked to come up with their own concept and create their own video pertaining to the topic of righting a wrong. And they can decide what that means. And we're anxious to see the positions that are considered in that competition, and they are due by April 1st, I believe. And we have a committee chaired by Tim Haught, one of our members of the Board of Governors of the State Bar, who's leading that effort, again in cooperation with the Department of Education.
That's fascinating. I was going to ask you, well, what does righting a wrong mean? It means whatever it means to them.
That's exactly right, yes.
They do film. How long do you anticipate these films to be?
I think the terms are up to 3 minutes, and the 3 winning videos will be chosen by a committee, and the winning video will be shown at the bar's annual meeting, which is coming up in about 50 days.
Now, one of the things we're going to try to do here at the Law Works, I've got to deal with the technical people to see if it actually is possible to do. We hope to bring the 3 winning entries in this competition to the Law Works, and perhaps even have the filmmakers come in and explain a little bit about how they came to have their approach, and then show the films on the Law Works. And then, of course, they'll be available on YouTube. That's why it's called a YouTube competition. So there's a lot to look at. These kinds of programs have done very well in other states,
yes,
and have been very popular.
Yes.
And how did you identify this concept as something to do here?
Yes. It is custom that the bar leadership, the officers, the 3 officers typically, go to the national meetings, the National Conference of Bar Presidents and the Southern Conference of Bar Presidents. As you well know from your term as state
There's
bar
a lot of
president,
travel as bar president.
A lot of travel, and it is understood that there will be thievery from state to state. And
we referred to it in my time. That was long as sharing ideas.
Sharing ideas, okay. And so we saw Texas present this concept in the YouTube competition. And we had worked on it as a state bar through our public information efforts for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, and just weren't getting it off the ground. And this year determined to see if we could get some help with the Department of Education. And that is how it has really become up and running.
Well, we're going to look forward to that. I think that's a great thing. Something else you mentioned was making online legal research available to your members.
Yes.
Tell us a bit more about that.
Yes, we have had a particular program for a few years now, and we're changing the specific program over the next few months, one that we evaluated and determined was a little bit better for our members, at least at this time.
There are a number of service providers of legal research that you can select from.
There are, and some are very expensive, and this is something that our bar has contracted as an organization to provide as a free service to our members as one of the benefits of membership. As I said, all the lawyers practicing full-time in West Virginia are required to be a member of the state bar. So it's not an option for them, but at the same time, we want to make sure that they can receive and feel as many benefits as we're able to provide within our budget.
I want to vouch for that. Legal research is difficult and is typically very time-consuming, but it is absolutely essential. When you ask a lawyer a question about what the law is or how the law applies to your situation, any lawyer who answers just off the top of her or his head is, in my opinion at least, making a mistake. You always have to make sure that the law has not changed or that there are not new interpretations of what the law means, and that's what legal research is all about. Lawyers are not necessarily expected to know the answers. They are expected to know how to find out what the answers are. There are too many questions to know the answers to all of them. Online legal research has made the research process immensely efficient. We can do now in minutes what used to take hours, days, or weeks. The West Virginia State Bar provides free online legal research to its members through these various providers. The providers get paid, of course, but they're paid through the State Bar, and the State Bar raises that money through dues to their members, which I think are very reasonable dues, I should mention. So the clients get the benefit of quicker, more thorough research that in past years would cost hundreds or thousands of dollars to do, and even the first versions of online legal research cost hundreds of dollars an hour to access the databases. You're getting that for free. You'll get a bill for the lawyer's time, most likely, if you're being billed for time, but you'll get the benefit of so much more. And when the State Bar came up with the idea of providing online legal research, it was like this, in my mind, it was like the sun came up for the provision of legal services in West Virginia.
Yes, it will be hard to match that as a service to our members. It's an excellent service to our members.
Now, that's not to say that lawyers don't pay for legal research in other contexts, because there are other databases to access, other services that offer broader things than the more basic types of services that the State Bar is allowed to sort of give away. But that's just absolutely wonderful. You are involved in outreach programs to help lawyers help the community. One that we'd mentioned was the YouTube program. Another that I want to specifically mention is this program. This is our 11th year, and it looks as though we'll be able to move into a 12th season with this program. The majority of the funding for this program has come from the West Virginia State Bar from the beginning. And its members have contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars of their time they could be spending in their offices making money for themselves, to this program and to you to help explain some of the issues involved in law here in West Virginia. And Sandy, I want to thank you for that. You and your predecessors. We started in the year 2000, late 1999, and we have continued to this time. Along with the assistance of some other organizations, voluntary bar groups, some companies, and the West Virginia Bar Foundation, who has been helping us also. So I thank you very much for that. One of the things you're also responsible in a broad sense for administering is lawyer discipline in West Virginia. Tell us how that is handled.
Yes, the lawyer discipline is through a separate office and a separate governing board. We do take care of the budget for lawyer disciplining, but that is a separate entity. They report to our Board of Governors at each of our meetings. We meet 4 times a year and have very elaborate agendas, as you well know. But that is probably the most important thing that the West Virginia State Bar as an organization and entity does, is see to our lawyer discipline. But at the same time, we have to keep that as separate from the governing of the work of the bar.
You do have some input into the makeup of the lawyer disciplinary committee.
Yes, each year there are new members appointed to that board. The staff is determined by that board, but typically among the presidential appointments each year are members to that board, and then those are approved or at least considered by the governing board of the West Virginia State Bar.
Some naysayers would argue that that's like having the fox guarding the hen house. But you do not tell them what to do, you do not tell them how to do it.
We're rather uninformed as far as the specifics of their work. We get statistics, we get overall information, but as far as any case information, that is completely removed from us and kept that way. They are even in a separate building, as I say, completely separate staff. We work together, we provide information to one another as is appropriate.
You provide the resources to the lawyer disciplinary folk to do their job.
Yes.
And the Supreme Court monitors that also.
Yes, they do.
Sometimes very closely.
Yes.
You have a good relationship with the state's only law school at West Virginia University.
We certainly do. The dean of the law school typically attends each of our quarterly meetings, and reports to us. We hear from her or him with regularity, and likewise we provide information to them. We certainly try to keep the dean of the law school in the loop. Also, the officers of the State Bar are members by virtue of their positions as officers, members of the visiting committee of the law school.
The visiting committee reviews what's going on at the law school,
Yes.
and makes recommendations as to how it should be done.
Yes.
The law school is, of course, accredited by the American Bar Association, so they have standards that they have to meet, and part of your function as an officer of the bar is to make sure they're help make sure
Yes.
they're meeting those obligations.
Yes,
You
to
do more
weigh-
than that, though. You provide some services to the students at the law school.
Yes, we do. We certainly try to. We do have a philanthropic arm of our organization, and that is the West Virginia Bar Foundation. But also, the West Virginia State Bar as an entity has historically, for some years, provided scholarships to law students. We hear from the law school and from various professors there, for example, to hear proposals about scholarships, categories of scholarships, and we try to respond appropriately to those as our budget permits. Also, for example, this year we're working with the Student Bar Association. They requested some funding for a race that they are having, a race for justice that they're having, which is a charitable race, and we are helping with that. So we do what we can.
The structure of the State Bar is, or the work of the State Bar is handled through various committees. Tell us about the committee structure that you have.
Okay. First of all, if I could back up from that, we have members from all across the state who are elected on a rotating basis and generally serve a 3-year term. We also have a couple of designated slots. We have a minority slot on our board, and we also have a young lawyer section slot on our board. So
You're talking about the Board of Governors of the State Bar.
The Board of Governors of the State Bar. So that's the makeup of our board. We have 3 officers and a past president on the board, and then regional representatives. But from that board derives various committee work. We have committees that do the work of the Board of Governors because we only meet 4 times a year, and we think that we have a lot of work to do. But there are also substantive committees. For example, one of our most active committees is the Family Law Committee, and the chair of that committee, just again as an example, has been the chair for more than a couple of years, and he, in this case Jim Douglas, will report to us from time to time about things that his committee might need or things that the committee thinks that we might need to know. Likewise, we may have a request of a particular substantive committee, such as an education law committee or an employment law committee. And those committees, the substantive committees, vary from year to year. And also, we have committees that are more of a protocol nature. For example, we have a committee that looks to how our officers are elected this year. We wanted to clean up and specify that process and define it a little more than we had it. Or we have a public information committee that seeks to work on some of the myths and misimpressions about lawyers. And I know that through that committee, you referred to the funding that we provide to this program, and we're so happy to do so because your work helps to dispel some of those myths and misimpressions about lawyers.
I have seen information come from these committees that in fact turn into state laws.
Yes.
Because the committee members recognize a problem that needs to be addressed or it needs to be remedied. And the legislature is generally quite receptive, quite willing to talk about, perhaps even draft bills and ultimately adopt laws, and they come out of these committees. Some of the committees that pop into mind, at least one of them, is the Probate Law Committee, Wills and Probates, or Estates and Probate Committee. The estate probate process in West Virginia has changed dramatically over the last several years as a result of the work done by that committee.
Yes. We're not a lobbying entity ourselves, but we do hear from our committees, and sometimes their work proceeds from our board beyond.
Right. There's a difference between political lobbying to advance the interests of a particular group and the review of existing laws or the creation of new laws to accomplish positive public purposes.
Yes.
the Probate Law Committee, for example, made recommendations along with faculty at the College of Law to change some things about probate structure, and you have likely seen programs here on this program about how those have changed over the years to make easier administration of estates, fairer distributions of property of deceased individuals, things that are more consistent with what people want to do. The Probate Law Committee has done that and has done that very well. We also have criminal law committees and things of that sort that are able to talk to the Supreme Court about changing rules of procedure, talk to the legislature about changing rules or changing statutes to clarify what a particular set of circumstances may be described as. In criminal law, there are felonies, there are misdemeanors, there are long prison sentences, there are short prison sentences, there are things like parole and probation. The lawyers who get their hands dirty with that sort of thing have uniquely specific and deeper understanding than anybody who reads about it in books might have.
Yes.
Where do you see the State Bar going? What would you like to see happen over the years with it?
Well, one of our long-term goals is to continue to work on the public impression of lawyers. We have a problem, we know it.
Good luck with that.
We know it's a long-term effort. But we also think that we know that folks generally like their own lawyer, and if they're in trouble, they want to turn to a lawyer. One of the first folks they turn to is their lawyer, and we just understand it's a long-term problem to solve, and we'll continue to work at it.
One of the ways you do that is quite literally through the education of lawyers with continuing education.
Yes.
What do you do there?
Yes. As you mentioned, we work closely with the College of Law, and through that relationship and otherwise, we take care of continuing legal education programs, and we also monitor the mandatory continuing legal education in the state. We work with a commission to do that, but we are a part of that process.
In fact, at one time there was no requirement for continuing education for lawyers.
That's correct. In West Virginia, that's correct.
Now you sponsor programs on your own, and you work with the Continuing Education Committee.
Yes.
What generally are the continuing education requirements for lawyers?
Well, we've been looking at that, as a matter of fact, over the last couple of years, wondering if we should change those requirements or at least change when they are due. Because the world is changing, and a lot of the continuing education that lawyers can get now is, for example, online or out of state. So we've really been trying to analyze if what we have is appropriate. And we also try to let the public know that we do have required education in this state. You don't finish law school, pass the bar, and be done with it. You have to keep up your education in order to maintain your license.
One of the things that public broadcasting has traditionally been involved in is described as lifelong learning. When you graduate from high school, when you graduate from college, or from college again, you don't necessarily stop learning. In fact, just yesterday I attended a continuing medical education meeting because one of my clients thought it was important to have a lawyer's perspective on medical issues. And attend legal education meetings very frequently because the law changes, approaches to the law change, ideas about the law change, and unless your lawyer continues to participate in those things, things will go by the boards. And that's where the mandatory concept comes in.
Yes.
You are required to take a certain number of hours of continuing legal education biannually.
Yes, that's correct.
And you report that. You get to be a lawyer some more
right.
if you do it, and you don't
That's
if
right.
you don't. Another committee that I wanted to touch on was the Law and Medicine Committee, because of the nature of my practice in some cases, but because of things that have come out of that committee. They have adopted forms for what is sometimes referred to as end-of-life planning, living wills, medical powers of attorney, working with the state's medical association, West Virginia Medical Association. You don't usually think of doctors and lawyers getting together and working things out, but through the state bar, those kinds of things happen also. The State Bar communicates with other bars around the nation. You communicate with your lawyers constantly. Is that working for you?
Well, we like to think so. We do have ongoing exchanges, and email has certainly helped in that regard. We have a weekly publication to our members called the Bar Blast, which updates them weekly. It's a very short blast, literally, of information.
You also have a web page that can be very handy at wvbar.org, wvbar.org. Sandra Chapman, President of West Virginia State Bar. Thank you, Sandy, for being with us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you also for being with us. On behalf of the LawWorks, I'm Dan Ringer. Good evening. On the LawWorks webpage at thelawworks.org, you'll find a listing of recent The LawWorks show topics and additional information about this show's topic. If you would like to recommend this program to a friend, you'll find video of this program at thelawworks.org, and you can find previous programs on YouTube. If you would like to suggest a topic for a future The LawWorks show, or if you're a school teacher and would like to receive a copy of this program for classroom use, please send us an email to thelawworks@comcast.net.
The LawWorks is produced in cooperation with the West Virginia State Bar, the Mountain State Bar, and the West Virginia University College of Law. The LawWorks is made possible by the generous support of the West Virginia State Bar, the Monongalia County Bar Association, and by a major grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.